The power of thought. Not long ago, a group of scientists and journalists assembled at the Bell Telephone Laboratories at Murray Hill, New Jersey, to witness an astonishing demonstration. The objects displayed for the inspection of the curious guests might not have seemed very impressive at first glance. One part of the exhibit was a toy Ferris wheel which turned and turned without winding. Another feature was two small radio transmitters which sent voice and music signals. Over a simple telephone unit, two men engaged in a conversation. For all these mechanisms, the power was provided by batteries. These were ordinary-looking affairs. They were made of strips of silicon, an ingredient of common sand. They possessed no moving parts. But they drew their power from the sun. The Bell Laboratories say that nothing is consumed or destroyed in the operation of their batteries, and that they should last indefinitely. Can you conceive how historic an event that demonstration is likely to prove? Since the dawn of the Industrial Revolution, when man first learned the secret of making large-scale mechanical power do the work he had been accustomed to performing with his own hands, he has been exhausting the physical resources of the earth at a tremendous rate. The earth contains only a given amount of coal and oil, and every year these priceless stores of power are consumed in greater quantity by our dynamos and machines. Some experts believe that more than half of our total reserves of coal and oil have already been used up. What remains may not last us more than another 50 years. Toward the close of World War II, the hopes of conservationists were raised by the discovery of a new fuel substitute, the energy locked inside the uranium atom. Unfortunately, however, the uranium used for the production of atomic power is exceedingly scarce. That is why it brings so high a price. The hope that it will replace coal and oil when these are gone is chimerical. The Earth's supply of uranium may well be exhausted long before the available supplies of coal and oil. But not the power of the sun. Scientists tell us that great star, which since the beginning of things has been emitting energy in the form of light and heat, will not be exhausted for a long time. They estimate that it will take about 150 billion years before it has burnt up even 1% of its mass. Each day it sends us almost as much energy as is contained in all the reserves of uranium, coal, and oil known to exist. When the Earth's bowels have been emptied of its precious supply of coal, oil, and uranium, we shall be able to produce electricity to keep our machines moving, our homes warm, and our cars and planes traveling, thanks to the discovery of the science of utilizing solar power. Our children's children will not have to burn their furniture for light or huddle together to keep from freezing. A thought came to them. The science of harnessing the energy of the sun is only in its infancy. Its adulthood, however, will mean a new age of freedom and ease for mankind. This discovery is unquestionably one of the most remarkable in history. Yet even more remarkable is the fact that it has come so late. For the estimated million years of his existence on Earth, man has bathed himself in the sun and drawn health and vigor from it. He has used it to grow wheat for his bread and corn for his pigs. He has reckoned his days and years by it, felt cheerful when it shone and sad when it hid its face behind clouds. It was right over his head, yet he completely overlooked it as a source of energy to be converted into mechanical power. In the annals of human progress, the men of science who developed the principles of the use of solar energy may well be described as geniuses. No doubt they possess many outstanding qualities, yet one is of much greater importance than the rest. These men were able to look at the obvious, a thing that billions of their fellows had passed by without a second glance, and see something in it that was not obvious. A thought came to them that did not come to other men. The thought of harnessing the seething strength of the sun. By putting that thought into practical application, they have earned the undying gratitude of the human race. Ideas revolutionize the world. It is thoughts that make our world. Historians say that electricity, the automobile, the airplane, and atomic energy have revolutionized life in the 20th century. So they have, but before each of these there was an idea. Every man that ever lived and possessed the power to see has watched birds in flight. There are very few, however, who, like Leonardo da Vinci and the Wright brothers, have taken the trouble to think seriously about flight. When these men thought and thought hard, their idea of a flying machine was born. In the final analysis, it was a thought that made human flight possible. The electric light was no chance discovery. As a young man, Thomas Alva Edison acquired a background in the principles of electricity. He recognized that this marvelous force, which even today is only vaguely understood, could be put to work in many remarkable ways. He looked at the candles and gas lights that were used in his time and saw how annoying and unreliable they were. The idea was born in his mind that he could, by using electricity, power a lamp that would be far superior to any means of illumination then known. For close to 10 years, Edison kept this idea in his mind. He made a glass lamp, and in it he tried one substance after another in an effort to find one that would burn for a long time, but none was satisfactory. He sent his people to every part of the earth to search for the proper material for his lamp. Thousands of different substances were forwarded to his laboratory from foreign lands. Each was painstakingly tested, with no success. Finally, after he had spent over $40,000 and an amount of effort beyond the capabilities of ordinary men, he managed to produce a lamp that would burn for all of 40 hours. His idea had at last been translated into partial reality. Further thought and testing created the superb electric lamp of today. The history of other inventions and discoveries is much the same. Take, as another example, Isaac Newton and the law of gravitation. A man once asked the great English scientist how he happened to discover it. His answer: by thinking about it all the time. Lengthened shadows of our thoughts. It is thoughts and ideas, not objects, that have revolutionized the world. Ralph Waldo Emerson, one of America's most noted thinkers, once remarked that an institution is the lengthened shadow of a man. He had in mind the fact that Mohammedanism directly reflects the work of Muhammad, Christianity the work of Jesus, Protestantism the work of Martin Luther. But each of these great figures of world religion had thoughts before he began the work for which he became famous. Thoughts made the man, then the institution. Every action, if it is not instinctual or produced by habit, is preceded by thought. Not only our institutions, but everything we have ever done or will do, for good or bad, is the lengthened shadow of our thoughts. Father of the deed. Thoughts are the fathers of deeds. You cannot achieve success or happiness in the world unless you have thoughts that are conducive to happiness or success. Look closely at the lives of the people about you, and you will see that, wherever their paths have led them, their thoughts went on before. Pasteur did not become a great chemist without first devoting all his thoughts to chemistry. John D. Rockefeller, Sr., did not become a millionaire without thinking about money and the ways and means of acquiring it. Through their concentrated thoughts, these men achieved what they wanted most out of life. The chief difference between the man who makes the grade in life and the man who does not lies in their thoughts. The person who was a shipping clerk at age 18 and is still tying packages and shifting boxes at age 58 may complain about his hard luck, but generally he has only himself to blame. The precise reason for his failure lies in his mind, not in his circumstances. He never seriously thought of himself as being anything but a shipping clerk. Of course, he would have liked to own the business that employed him, or to gain wealth in some other way. But he never held such thoughts earnestly or kept them steadfast in mind. Had he been seriously dissatisfied, had he converted his discontent into constructive channels, there is little doubt that he would have amounted to something. Shakespeare's memorable lines place the responsibility where it belongs. The fault, dear Brutus, lies not in our stars, but in ourselves that we are underlings. This truth was realized thousands of years ago by the masters of the Far East. In the words of the Upanishads, the ancient books of Hindu wisdom, a man becomes what he thinks. Thought and character. A man's character, generally speaking, is not separable from the thoughts he has. A man's thoughts are his character. And it is equally true that a direct relationship exists between the circumstances in which a person habitually finds himself and the kind of thinking that goes on inside his head. Whatever your situation in life, it is a reflection of your inner being and the kind of thoughts you have. The thoughts, either helpful or damaging, that you have allowed to take root in your mind, and that you have nurtured there either consciously or unconsciously, have determined your lot with all the accuracy of a mathematical principle. Metaphysicians are in the habit of calling this principle the law of attraction. They point out that the mind attracts to itself those things or circumstances that appeal to it. It is as though they already existed in it in embryo. Thus, the fears in your mind will sooner or later be turned into reality. If they are strong enough, so too will be the things your mind cherishes. Circumstances, says the metaphysician, are the means by which the soul receives its own. Thought over environment. We do not have to look far to discover examples of people who have refused to be satisfied with the circumstances in which they were born. Our history is full of the epic achievements of such men. Two of the most forceful figures that ever occupied the White House, Andrew Jackson and Abraham Lincoln, came of exceedingly humble origins. Although born poor, they realized they could make their own circumstances. In lifting themselves up, they were of service not only to themselves, but to their country. Of course, simply wanting to get ahead is no guarantee that a man will reach his goal. The wish comes first, but it must be strong enough to generate the energy and persistence that serve to make a man irresistible. Fortune, says an old Sanskrit proverb, attendeth that lion amongst men who exerteth himself. They are weak men who declare fate to be the sole cause. The career of Thomas Jonathan Jackson, Stonewall Jackson, one of the most famous and inspired generals of all time, offers a superb example of the power of thought over environment. Every step of the way, Jackson consciously nurtured thoughts that would help him to better his lot. Striving against obstacles. Tom Jackson's childhood hardly betokened great achievements. He was orphaned early in life, and his parents' death left him completely unprovided for. What little education he had was received at a small school in the rural South. This poor boy burned with a desire to make something of himself. He wanted to become an officer in the United States Army. Nomination to enter West Point, then as now, lay in the hands of the local congressman. And what congressman would think of nominating humble Tom Jackson, when the son of a fine old Southern family with considerable political influence wanted to get into the military academy? Tom's chances of becoming an Army officer did not look very promising. Still, if your thought is strong enough, it will find a way to project itself into reality. Your thought will make you so sensitive to opportunity that you will hear opportunity before it knocks. Another boy had been preferred to Tom for the West Point nomination. That boy rode off gaily to the famed soldier school on the Hudson. When he got there, however, he found that the military life was more than handsome uniforms, colorful parades, and dates with admiring beauties. Discipline was severe. The studies were arduous. The life was all hard work, day and night, with a minimum of glamour. The boy soon had more than he could take. He tendered his resignation and headed for home. When Tom heard the news, he sprang into action. He had no powerful friends, but by dint of his sincerity and earnestness he was able to win support from total strangers. He was named as a replacement for the youth who had dropped out. Like a fire-breathing dragon, a strenuous entrance examination still blocked the gates of the academy to Tom. But this boy who wanted to get ahead did not know the meaning of discouragement. He had always used idle moments to fill his head with information that his meager education had denied him. To this store of knowledge he added now, by intensive study. He took the examination and passed. Tom Jackson, when he first appeared at the academy, standing among the smartly turned-out recruits from well-to-do homes, was hardly a prepossessing figure. He seemed ill at ease and gawky in his poor country clothes. But he had something more important to advancement in the military than fine clothing. He had determined with his heart and soul that he would succeed, and he was prepared to back up his resolution with indefatigable effort. Those who had been amused at the poor figure Jackson cut in his first days at West Point soon had occasion to stifle their laughter. He shone in his classes and on the parade ground. He did better than his fellow students because he worked harder, driven by a sense of his deficiencies. Each evening, as the hour for taps approached, young Jackson used to carry coals to the stove in his dormitory. He piled them so high that the fire was almost extinguished. When the signal was given to put out the lights, however, there was a bright blaze going in his stove. Young Jackson moved his books to the floor next to the stove, and there, in the ruddy glow, put in extra hours of study while his classmates slept. Only when the coal was consumed and the gloom became too deep for him to see any longer did he crawl into bed. You may be whatever you resolve to be. One of Tom Jackson's favorite sayings in those days sums up the story of his life. Like George Washington and Benjamin Franklin before him, he wrote a list of rules by which he strove to guide his conduct. One rule in particular closely echoes the teaching of the masters of the Far East. You may be whatever you resolve to be. And Old Jack, as young Tom was known to his friends, had resolved to be more than an ordinary West Pointer. He wanted to be a great soldier. Jackson was a second lieutenant when he saw service in the artillery in the war with Mexico. He soon rose to first lieutenant, and then, for his gallantry in action, was promoted to the rank of captain. There was no stopping this daring soldier, who placed his trust in himself and his God, and was indifferent to the enemy's fire. Within a year he was a major. His friends and his superiors esteemed him for his honesty, which knew no limits, his love of the truth, his fearlessness, and his straightforwardness. After the Mexican War, a long period of peace ensued. Jackson became a professor at the Virginia Military Institute, where for 10 years he taught military science and other subjects. As he taught, he studied too, widening his knowledge of the strategy and tactics of warfare. Although he was a soldier, he was not cast in any hell and brimstone mold. He was a deeply religious man, and he lived his religion. He always showed great kindness to the slaves, teaching them the wisdom of the Bible. In 1861, the North and the South arrived at the breaking point. Jackson could not forget the loyalty he owed his native Virginia, and offered his services to the South. He was made a colonel of infantry, and in a few months a brigadier general. Jackson knew that a general, no matter how brilliant, could never attempt more than his soldiers were willing to execute. He concentrated on the training of his men. So well did he prepare the soldiers under his command that when they faced the terrible fire of the Federal troops at Bull Run, when other units were taking to their heels, they stood firm. Because of their steadfastness under fire, he was forever after known as Stonewall Jackson. In battle after battle, Jackson showed himself worthy of the trust the South placed in him. Self-assurance and success were rooted in the nature of his being. He is credited with the major part in stopping McClellan's deadly advance upon Richmond. Without him, it is probable that the Confederacy would have lost the Second Battle of Bull Run. General Robert E. Lee called him his good right arm. Jackson was dreaded by the Federal armies as much as any man alive. Where all the planning and courage of the enemy had failed to harm the dauntless Stonewall Jackson, the stupidity of people on his own side succeeded. After his greatest victory in the Wilderness near Chancellorsville, he met his death through an accident. Inspecting enemy positions after dark, he and his officers were mistaken for Northerners by the Confederate sentries, who opened fire, wounding him fatally. If you travel through the South, you will see several fine statues erected to Jackson's memory. None is more meaningful than the one at Richmond. The first contribution toward its cost came from the Baptist congregation of Negro slaves, to which he had shown so much kindness in his days at the Military Institute in Virginia. Just as he refused to accept the lot of a poor Southerner in a humble country town, Jackson refused to remain an ordinary shavetail, serving his time till he was eligible for a pension. Thought is character, and the thoughts of this singular man were high ones. His lofty, ambitious thoughts won him not only worldly success, but a permanent niche in the pantheon of military greatness. Thoughts control actions. Among the masters of the Far East, thoughts are recognized as having so profound an influence on one's life that they are conceived of, literally, as being things. The masters say that thoughts have an actual existence. They are practically alive, for they possess reality in space, have a certain form, move at different rates of speed, and last for certain periods of time. Thoughts have the power to control actions. If you are the master of your thoughts, say the masters, you can make them do your bidding and be a powerful help to you. But if you do not direct them, they will direct you, ensnare you, and lead you to misfortune. Listen to the words of Buddha, the enlightened one, set down by him in the Dhammapada. As the shaper of arrows makes straight his arrow, a wise man makes straight his trembling and unsteady thought, which is difficult to guard, difficult to hold back. As a fish taken from his watery home and thrown on the dry ground, our thought trembles all over in order to escape the dominion of Mara, the tempter. It is good to tame the mind, which is often difficult to hold in and flighty, rushing wherever it listeth. A tamed mind brings happiness. Let the wise man guard his thoughts, for they are difficult to perceive, very artful, and they rush wherever they list. Thoughts well guarded bring happiness. Aim your thoughts well. Buddha's advice, though exceedingly ancient, has not diminished in value with the passing of time. If you wish to improve your circumstances, mold your thoughts firmly and surely, and always keep them in your control. If you let your thoughts arise as they will, and fly forth at random, you will never hit the target you have set for yourself in life. Without thought direction, there is little chance of success. One of America's most distinguished poets, a contemporary of Stonewall Jackson's, was Henry Wadsworth Longfellow. Countless millions have been enthralled by his masterpieces, The Courtship of Miles Standish, Evangeline, and Hiawatha. Longfellow did not achieve greatness, any more than Stonewall Jackson did, simply by thinking of it now and then. His mind dwelled upon it all the time. As he said, "I most eagerly aspire after future eminence in literature. My whole soul burns most ardently for it, and every earthly thought centers in it." Longfellow kept his thoughts constantly aimed at his target. That is how he won fame and immortality. Compare Henry Wadsworth Longfellow to the thousands of minor poets whom hardly anyone outside their own circles has ever heard of, or to the still more thousands of would-be poets who have played with the idea of writing verse, but have never gotten around to putting their thoughts on paper. The reason they cannot succeed as Longfellow did is that they allow their thoughts to escape them as they arise. Thoughts have a life of their own, and unless you make them do what you want them to do, they will go their own way, futile shots from your bow. The poverty thought. An incredible number of thoughts arise in your mind every day. Many have an enormous power to do you harm, just as an arrow accidentally shot from a bow may kill or wound. One of these injurious thoughts is the poverty thought. If you come of a poor family, the poverty thought is almost your natural heritage. From childhood days onward, you became accustomed to thinking that all your years must be lean ones. You take it for granted that you cannot rise above your circumstances. Perhaps your father was a humble man before you, and you suppose your lot can be no better than his was. The poverty thought paralyzes you, making you incapable of liberating the great energies that lie dormant within you. Many people who are poor will tell you that they want little enough out of life. They are ready to be contented with a small income and modest circumstances. Since the thought is the ancestor of the deed, they do not aspire very high. The inevitable result is that they do not achieve very much. The man or woman who wants success must counter the poverty thought with the wealth thought. How this may be done will be explained later when we consider the method of contrary concentration. The failure thought. Another arrow that deals death to the ambition of innumerable human beings is the failure thought. Often it strikes us in childhood, just as the poverty thought does. When we were children, we possessed a strong desire to do things for ourselves. The first time we managed to put our own socks on or tied our shoelaces, we felt as proud of our achievement as Stonewall Jackson did when he won an important battle, or Longfellow when he finished a great poem. When for the first time we set the table or put our room to rights by ourselves, we felt a glow of satisfaction, perhaps as warm as any that life has to offer. Experts in child psychology nowadays advise that parents who want to prepare their children for successful adulthood should praise them when they do a thing well. The experts remind us that a sense of achievement in small things inspires us with the confidence we need in order to attempt and accomplish great things. Experience teaches us the accuracy of this observation. But how many of us are open-minded enough to learn from experience? Often, parents see only a child's shortcomings. The youngster holding up a drawing on which he has lavished much labor may say, "Look, mother, isn't it a nice clown I've drawn?" And the mother, looking at the child's picture with the eyes of an adult, shakes her head and replies, "It doesn't look much like a clown to me." Or else, because in setting the table the child has misplaced a fork or a spoon, she scolds him for his error, completely overlooking the things he has done correctly. If she behaves this way repeatedly, the child begins to believe that he cannot do anything well or successfully. The seed of the failure thought, planted and watered by the parent's ignorance, can grow into a monstrous weed that will choke a child's confidence in himself forever. Employers, too, often have very little understanding of the pervasive importance of the failure thought in keeping a person from doing his best. Many a time a new employee will do a job as best he can, yet when the boss looks at it, he will see its shortcomings only. He will emphasize to the worker what is wrong, without giving a thought to the fact that on the whole, the job is well done. Should this happen again and again, the employee will lose confidence in his ability to do what is expected of him. The failure thought takes control of his mind. The almost inevitable result is that he will quit, or else the quality of his performance will deteriorate, and he will be discharged, to go off in search of new employment with his sense of self-esteem seriously damaged. The sickness thought. Perhaps nowhere will you find more marked evidence of the power of thought to help or to harm than in the sphere of health. There are millions of people in the world today who are crippled by the sickness thought. Although the germ of their disease is mental, these persons are actually physically ill, with the concrete, recognizable symptoms of specific maladies. They complain of headaches, insomnia, susceptibility to colds, and a host of other common ailments. Others may show signs of graver disturbances. All of these illnesses are on occasion caused by sickness thoughts. Is this hard to believe? Well, modern physicians believe it, although a generation ago most contended that disease had to have a physical cause. In the last few decades, an entirely new viewpoint and a new branch of medicine have come into existence. It is known as psychosomatic medicine. Psychosomatic is derived from the Greek words for soul and body, and this new study treats of diseases produced by the influence of the mind on the body, and the body on the mind. The reason this branch of medicine was so slow in arising, and millions had to suffer because of erroneous diagnosis and consequent incorrect treatment, is that the West has been accustomed for ages to think of the mind and body as separate and independent entities. In this field, as in others, it required true genius to discover a fact that should have been obvious from the start, that the mind is a function of the brain, which is a part of the body, and therefore influences it greatly, and is in turn influenced by it. Only a moment's reflection will suffice to prove the soundness of the mind-body view of illness. When you are bored or dispirited, you frequently find you have a headache too, or else you are overcome by a feeling of fatigue, although you have not engaged in physical effort. Your state of mind infects your body. If something disturbing happens, you feel sick to your stomach and cannot eat. If you are physically unwell, you fall prey to a fit of depression and are frequently unable to concentrate. Faith cures. The masters of the Far East attained an understanding of the mind-body relationship thousands of years ago. As we saw earlier, they recognized the fundamental unity of all things, which they called Brahma, and taught that we cannot separate the action of the mind from the body. Christian Science also discovered this truth for itself long before most physicians did. It is the secret of Christ's healing. Once Jesus removed the sickness thought from a person, that man became whole again. The cures performed by other great religious leaders and holy men are made on the same basis. This is the scientific explanation of the miracles at Lourdes, where, with the help of faith, sick persons make themselves well again. Oriental physicians, having a knowledge of the teaching of the masters of the Far East, have since ancient times considered the close connection between sickness and states of the mind or emotions in making a diagnosis. Where an illness is not overtly physical in origin, they immediately turn their attention to the patient's feelings. Like the masters, they have always maintained that by making one's thoughts and desires pure, one could control his general health, provided simple hygienic measures were taken. How emotions influence the body. The precise mechanisms by which the emotions influence the body are complicated, but some are well known today. Strong feelings send messages along the pathways of the nerves to the endocrine glands, stimulating them to produce hormones. These hormones, sometimes known as chemical messengers, travel through the bloodstream, stimulating the heart, the stomach, and other organs to greater or lesser activity. Like almost every other part of the body, the chemical messengers are important to our physical well-being. But if our emotions are constantly telegraphing alarms to the glands, and these are made overactive, the result is not a happy one. Fear and anger are among the most dangerous of the emotions. When you are angry, the anger thought produces a profound effect throughout the body. For one thing, the stomach is stimulated to secrete large amounts of hydrochloric acid, a powerful chemical. If this happens often enough, you may suffer from chronic indigestion or worse disorders. Physicians and scientists have had ample opportunity to look directly into the stomach of a man and observe how it is affected by his emotions. A noted case is that of a man named Tom, who has been studied by Dr. Harold G. Wolff and his colleagues at Cornell University. When Tom was a boy, he had to have an emergency operation, which left an opening in his stomach. Peering through this hole today, the doctors can see how Tom feels about the things that are in his mind. For example, on one occasion, one of the physicians told Tom that he was not doing a good job and that he would be discharged. This, of course, was a trick to provoke a reaction. Tom felt what the doctor had said was very unfair. He became furious, and his face turned red. He complained bitterly to Dr. Wolff when the physician had left. Immediately afterward, Dr. Wolff looked into Tom's stomach. He saw that it had become a bright red, and that the stomach glands were pouring hydrochloric acid into it. He observed a large number of minute hemorrhages in the stomach wall, and that the stomach was expanding and contracting at a furious rate. It is in much the same way as this, when people are subjected to continuous worry and stress, that stomach ulcers are produced. The fear thought and illness. A man becomes what he thinks, including what he fears, if the fears are strong and persistent. Many sickness thoughts have their origin in fear. For confirmation of this, we may look at one curious ailment, which goes by the formidable name of iatrogenic heart disease. Like so many other disorders, this one is particularly common in the over-emotional, those who have never learned to understand and control their thoughts and feelings. Iatrogenic means literally, produced by a physician. That's an odd term, but physicians make use of it. It describes the following sort of case. A man goes to a doctor for a physical examination. The doctor scrutinizes his visitor's anatomy, takes his blood pressure, and applies the stethoscope to his chest. What does he hear? Generally, the sound of a normal heart. However, the doctor is an earnest, hard-working person, and he frowns as he concentrates on the sound. Many of us knit our brows when we concentrate. To the patient, however, the doctor's frown immediately suggests the thought that there is something seriously the matter with his heart. He asks the doctor, who assures him he is quite all right. Still the doctor, possibly because he lacks a bedside manner, does not smile. The patient, whose mind is ever open to sickness thoughts, now supposes the doctor is lying, because he does not want to tell him the dreadful truth. He goes from physician to physician, trying to find one who will confirm his worst fears. He worries endlessly. His digestion is disturbed, he cannot sleep, and his tension reflects itself in a rise in his blood pressure. In time, the constant worry and strain may wear down his heart, producing the very trouble that he feared. Paralyzed by fear. Where fears are heightened, there you will find the most dreadful examples of the influence of the emotions on the body. Our two world wars have provided harrowing proof of the truth of the psychosomatic concept. Under the stress of war, soldiers have lost the power to use their limbs, the ability to see and speak, all without direct physical injury. In time, sympathetic treatment and analysis of their fears and other personal problems have brought many of them around. These are the illnesses that used to be known as shell shock. The term has now passed out of use, since many of its worst casualties occurred far from the field of battle. The emotion of fear not only maims people, it kills them as well. One of the gravest dangers to any person who has been injured is shock. A man may be knocked down by an automobile or fall from a first-story window and die immediately. When he is examined, it is not unusual for the physician to find that the loss of blood or the extent of the injury suffered was insufficient to cause death. The patient died because his fear and the jolt to his nervous system were so great that his heart stopped. In all cases of serious injury, first aid procedure recommends that the patient be treated for shock, which may be the gravest danger to which he has been exposed. We can find many curious examples of the power of thought to create a physical reaction. One of the most interesting is related by the scientist Count Alfred Korzybski. He tells of a man who was allergic to roses. So fearful to this man was the sight of roses that when on one occasion he was shown a picture of these flowers, he was seized by a powerful attack of sneezing. More than half of all hospital beds in the United States are occupied by persons suffering from mental illness. Although this type of disturbance arises in the mind, it is not imaginary. As we have seen, thoughts are mighty things for good or evil, greatest force on earth. We have seen that, for good or ill, thought is the greatest force on earth. In the larger sphere, it has been responsible for the progress and civilization whose fruits we enjoy today. The helpful inventions of an Edison or of a Wilbur or Orville Wright, the life-saving discoveries of a Pasteur, the literary creations of a Longfellow, all are the products of good thinking. The collective constructive thinking of scores of wise men imaged forth the shape and plan of our great democratic country before it could be made into reality. In the smaller personal sphere, we have seen that thought influences every atom of our being and can make us healthy or make us ill. It can help us to remold our circumstances in the image of our most cherished desires, or it can keep us mired in a slough of poverty, failure, and despair. We can no longer question the truth of the words of Bodhidharma, the master yogin of China, who said, "There is neither cause nor effect apart from the mind and heart." Nirvana itself is a state of the heart. Whether you are rich or poor, well or ill, cheerful or dispirited, is very much up to yourself. All human experience proclaims that tomorrow need not be like today. Life, the masters tell us, is infinitely plastic and malleable. If you take it firmly and knowingly in your hands in the way of the masters, and their way is not a difficult one, you can refashion it as you would like it to be. But if you work blindly and without forethought, you may make of it a nightmarish thing.